Did you just bring that up to put me on the defensive?
No, why is that bad?
One of the things I love about Rachel is that she is like, we could tell people that I get stuck on stuff and I text you and you are the most resourceful person I probably have ever met in radio. Our BS meter is all set, to sensitive. We can tell within moments if a brand, a person is being honest with us, if they're the real deal. I always tell talent that the listener will care about the show when they care about you. And you have the power to do that. So talent in Hartford, Connecticut, that sent me a break that I work with, her cancer's back. And she was having a dental exam. And the hygienist found a lump in her mouth. Ended the exam. They went and did x-rays. Long story short, she went to her oncologist, who confirmed that her cancer was bad. But it was found so early because of the dental exam. She went back to the dentist's office to tell the hygienist, because of you, things were found early. And it wasn't done in a way where it feels like there's an invasion. I mean, she announced, I'm recording this. It was 2.5 minutes of, I've played it for so many shows. Like, this is a great example of both being honest with the audience and being vulnerable, letting them in. I know in research and radio research, but I think in life, if you step out and you have fans and detractors, you're doing a good job.
Okay, so my guest today is Steve Reynolds. Steve Reynolds is a coach. He is a talent coach. I'll mess that up in the very beginning of this interview. You'll see. I'm awesome. But I met him in, I think, 2005, 2006, when I moved from TV and film into radio in Atlanta. I moved in with my mother. My first marriage was over. And I decided I wanted to give radio a try. I knew I could do radio. In fact, I knew I could be amazing in radio. As a producer, behind the scenes, and as a character or personality on air when needed. And Steve was our first radio consultant, or my first radio consultant that I've ever had. Sorry, not a radio consultant. And so I ended up getting a job at the Steve Vikki Morning Show on Star 94 in Atlanta. They were a heritage show, meaning they had been on the air for probably 17 years by the time I came and joined the team. And they were trying to youngify the show, and they had Steve as the consultant. And so we got to know each other really, really well, because I didn't understand the complexities of radio and the personality issues and being part of a team, but also feeling like you're a family, but also, through feeling like you're a family, the dysfunction of that, and the interpersonal relationships and how that ebbs and flows. Whereas in TV, it was very like, here's the talent, we show up, we support them, this is what we do, air the thing, do it again tomorrow. There is a complex nature of radio, of sitting in that little room together with those headphones on and literally just hearing the voice of the person across from you. Despite knowing you're, thousands to millions of people are possibly listening to you, there's still something very intimate about that experience and that relationship with your team members. And so Steve walked me through a lot of that. And so I'm so happy that you guys get to meet him today on my show. For people who don't know, you are Steve Reynolds and you are a radio consultant. And we met back in, I want to say, was it 2006? I think when I was working for the Steve Vikki Morning Show, 2006 in Atlanta. And I was brought on as a producer to sort of youngify Steve and Vikki at the time, because they were the heritage morning show. And that is how I met you. Mm-hmm. Tell everybody, what is a radio consultant or a coach? How do you refer to yourself?
I call myself a talent coach because I don't like the word consultant, because the word consultant, there's a bias in that word. There are stereotypes with everything. And, the stereotype of the word, I tell shows, if you want to get under my skin, call me a consultant. So you have successfully, as much as I adore you, have known you for almost 20 years. You started on a bad note.
We'll make it better, I promise.
There is this stereotype that the consultant does it because they didn't know how to do it themselves, or that they're know-it-alls, or they're not collaborators, they're not creatives. They steal creative from here, bring it over there. And while, that happens with everybody, right? Anyone who's in the arena is studying and looking at everyone. I'm a talent coach. And I started years ago, the smartest man in radio, John Coleman, who's the owner of Coleman Insights, a big research company, said to me, I'm going to help you start a company because radio is going to change and it's going to need people to support and grow talent. And so I met you back when my company was only a couple of years old, as I started this venture of introducing to radio companies this whole new category, this concept of people that would come in and help improve the talent and the content that they did to build deeper loyalty to the show. And the thing, if I can, and I'm sure you've talked about this, but the thing that most intrigued me about you, and the reason I keep going back to you, is because of your roots. So what it has always intrigued me about you is you didn't have history in our industry. You had history in television, and that was fascinating to me because you thought like a true producer. Like, how do I make this segment so different and better and reflective of the talent, the iconic talent that you touched and worked with? And so when we met, I'm like, wow, that's different. And that's why I always felt there are a lot of great producers in radio. No disrespect against them, but there's only one I've ever met that worked network television and thought like you did. So, that's what I do. That's what I've done for, 20 years.
Well, I bridged the gap because when I was working at The View, I loved the Hot Topic segment. And I would say at the time, like, we need to do more hot topics. We need to do more hot topics. Like, people love this stuff. No one else is doing it like this. And of course, they didn't listen to me then. Now all they're doing is hot topics, of course. But I thought radio is 4 hours of hot topics. And if we can get the attention span, because, that ADHD attention span around that time was starting to take peak, right? Long breaks were not working. And so I thought, okay, if we took those short breaks that TV has to engage people within that amount of time and convert that in radio, and do this for 4 hours at a time, I know I can do this. And so it just really worked for me. It was definitely my wheelhouse and I loved doing it. I loved what we did. But you, as a coach, you did have experience in radio. I was just listening to some of your breaks. Do you know some of your breaks are online?
Of me?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Really?
Somebody put tapes of your show and they digitized them and they're online. And so, because I had never heard you on your radio show. It was Reynolds and Silva. And I believe, hold on, I'm going to give you the date that they pulled. They pulled 1986 WRDU FM 106.1 in Raleigh, Reynolds and Silva morning show.
Okay.
Complete with music and everything. Okay, so I'm going to pause this. He doesn't want to hear himself, but I'm going to play it for you because I found this and I can't believe I found this.
Reynolds and Company censored joke.
Good morning.
Hi there.
Look, it's officially really excited. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome a lot, sir. The setup on the censored joke this Thursday morning is what gets a fisherman really excited. 860-1061, 800-233-1061 for the punchline this morning. WRDU 106, Wilson, Raleigh, Durham, only the finest rock and roll a minute before 7. Two other ways you can get the punchline besides calling us. Either ask around the office. We're sure that by the time you get to work, somebody's going to have found out or have heard it. Or tonight at 7:20, Oscar Robertson has the punchline and the punchline only for you. Sorry, what?
Oscar Robertson.
Bob
Robinson.
I'm sorry. What is his name?
Bob Robinson.
I'm sorry. What's he on?
But don't admit it. Don't make like you didn't make the mistake.
No, just pick it up.
Okay, well, edit that out.
Okay. Tonight, he'll have the punchline and the punchline only on WRDU 106.
Bob Robinson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
I was
goodness.
like, oh my God.
I've always said there's nothing online. I'm going to have to get my people to scrub the internet of all of that stuff.
No, I love it because I never heard your show. And I was like, I need to hear who Steve was back then. And you sound very the same. You haven't changed. You were just authentically you then as you are now.
Did you just bring that up to put me on the defensive?
No, why is that bad?
No,
You are adorable. I loved it.
I've lived my whole time doing this coaching stuff, always saying you'll never find anything online. But then, of course, one of the things I love about Rachel is that she is like, we could tell people that I get stuck on stuff and I text you and you are the most resourceful person I probably have ever met in radio. Hey, Rachel, I need a phone number for George Clooney. And then, the three bubbles pop up and I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. 416.
Yeah, if it's not already in my phone, I know how to find it probably within minutes.
Yeah. So I've always said, though, there's never anything online. Do not send me a link because I have run out of edibles and I would need to take one to listen to it.
Oh my God, I love you. The bit, I'm going to tell you the bit though, because I want to see if you remember the bit. Okay. The bit was censored joke. Right. So you give only part of the joke and then later that night in somebody else's show, they get to hear the other part of the joke.
So what we did, and I will have to always give credit where it's due because, I learned early on in my on-air career, someone said to me, I've never forgotten who said it, a guy by the name of Gary Guthrie, to copy 1 is plagiarism, to copy 6 is research. Go do your research. And that shows, the collaborative nature. And having spent your time in radio, that there are original things that are developed. But so many are talking with other talent, like, what did you do that worked? So when I worked in Springfield, Massachusetts, in Hartford, Connecticut, there was a morning guy by the name of Gary Craig. And I would tape him. I was enamored by him because he did radio unlike I had ever heard before. So it's kind of captured my imagination. And it was at a very early stage of my career when I was kind of figuring out who Steve Reynolds was on the air before this whole authenticity thing. And Gary did every Thursday, he did the dirty joke. And when I moved to Raleigh, I said, I'm going to take that feature, change its name. And so for those people who are listening in on this, we gave the setup of what was a true dirty joke out, right? What's white and dribbles across the sky? And listeners would call and they would repeat the setup. We'd give them the punchline. And it was always like FCC fines all over the place. And then they'd react to it, usually laughter. We'd edit out the punchline. So all you heard was the setup and the reaction. And that intrigued people. And so they said, well, what was the punchline? And then later in the day, we would just give the punchline out because unless you had both of them, it wasn't a censored or dirty joke. And our owners of the radio station hated it. They hated the feature. And, in one of Steve's rebellious acts, they would come to me and say, please take the feature off because, their friends at the country club didn't like it. So,
oh God, that was always the hard part of having to sit down with a PD, a program director, because all the stations I had worked for were geared toward women my age. And so it would always be, well, my wife said, or like my sister said. And it's like, but I'm the age of the person that we're trying to reach. And I'm telling you that this works, that this is funny.
I don't know that anyone is right or anyone is wrong. I always get very nervous saying one person believes this, therefore everyone believes it. We just have to do what's right for the audience. And based on the research the station did, the reaction that we would get from listeners, this is all pre-social media. It worked. People would come up and say, what was the punchline on Thursday? I didn't call in. I couldn't call in. And we'd give it to them. And the fact that they retained it, and it was a much different time in radio, right? There's much less competition. So radio shows really stood out more. The fact that they would ask us days later meant that it was a tangible piece of unique content that they held on to. And so I always rebuff the owners who lived in town, and to their credit, they allowed that to happen. They trusted Kevin and me.
Well, also got people to listen to the night show, right? To hear the other part of the joke. So to me, it works across boundaries, across lines for the station,
Correct.
for the whole team. Back in the day, radio DJs, I believe, were the first influencers, right? We live in a creator and influencer society now. But back then, radio DJs were celebrities. They were so popular. And I believe they were the beginning of influencer culture.
Yeah.
People would listen. They would do whatever a DJ did or said. They would go to the restaurant. They would go see the movie, whatever it is, they would buy it, whether it was, promoted or sponsored or not. And so how do you feel with this, or do you feel like there's a shift from radio talent being like huge in the market to now influencers and creators doing this online on social media, on YouTube? Do you feel like radio DJs have as much power as they used to have?
The short answer is some of them do if they're multimedia stars. And there are some radio companies that support and groom that. I think every talent has a responsibility to be wherever the audience is. You can't be a success in radio any longer if you are just on the radio. If you don't have a team of people that teaches you all of this, I have no issue with talent coaches and managers and business managers and people who put plans together for your domination across all of the platforms by which there are eyes and ears. And we've moved in a visual direction, and the ones that win, I mean, there are radio shows that I'm aware of that have Facebook followings approaching 1 million people. That's amazing. Look at Ryan Seacrest is a great example of this. Ryan Seacrest is a TV star. Everything else he touches, there's stardom inside of that, so that when either iHeart or Ryan or any of the entities that swirl around either of those two brands go to monetize it, people listen because you're everywhere. You're based in Detroit, and there's an old morning guy who has always fascinated me. That I'm sure you've heard the name J.P. McCarthy.
Okay, yeah. Who
was on WJR, an AM radio station, and I did the public TV station in Detroit. I don't remember the call letters. Many years ago, did a 3-hour show about J.P. McCarthy, and I watched it, and till my ADD kicked in, and
same.
No matter where that guy went, he was the mayor of the town. And this is before television was still in its infancy. This is how dated this is. And there was obviously no internet. But he'd go somewhere, he'd go to a ribbon cutting, and hundreds of people would show up, to the point that radio folks were the original influencers. Yep. And yeah, they can today. But I don't think, given the pressures, the time commitment pressures, the strategic pressures on talent, I don't think they can do it alone. Ryan doesn't do it alone. Bobby Bones doesn't do it alone. They have people who push them in directions they can't see, and they basically executive produce their brand and are richer because of it and more popular because of it.
And that's what I've noticed, especially at Odyssey. They have brand managers. They don't have PDs anymore, right? Like, these shows are brands. And if you want to be a brand, it has to go beyond those 4 hours in the morning,
right,
or whatever your shift is. Yeah. There's no other way to grow now beyond your local market than to embrace other ways to create content.
Let's also talk about, they're brand managers too, not only for that reason, but because at least for radio, it can't just be about music. I mean, it could be about music when I was on or back in the day, but now I can get the music that any radio station plays anywhere. I mean, I hear stations sometimes still take requests, and I'm like, there is an entity that takes my requests, and that's called Spotify.
Right.
I don't need you to play my song and sit around and wait for it. I just go to Spotify and say, hey, I want to hear this song. And within 4 seconds, I'm listening to it.
Right.
What these brand managers understand is that for the health and success of radio, there's way more than just music. And you have to have credible talent on the radio. that build trust and a connection with the audience. That's really where the trust factor comes in. That's how they make their money, is by having talent on the radio station that a lot of people say, hey, he or she is just like me. They're really entertaining, and I want to make them a part of my life. But then there's getting involved in the community. There's giving out stuff. There's a marketing angle. There's so much that goes to it. As we record this, last week, there were terrible storms in Houston, Texas. And that's when radio shines. You don't have power, but you got a battery-powered radio in the laundry room, in the closet, put a couple of D-cells in, and it's radio that's connecting you back to the world. That's when radio really shines.
That's 100% true. Yeah. Anytime anything goes wrong around here, I'm like, put the radio on. We need to figure out what's going on. Because Twitter's not going to have that same conversation with you. You can't do that on Twitter X.
I programmed WRAL here in Raleigh for a few years. I felt like I needed programming or brand manager experiences. They were program directors back then. And we had a sister TV station. And I prayed for bad weather, because our ratings went up because we were the source for that information. And they left every radio station and came to us for that.
Well, I love that too, because it breaks the fourth wall. I think when I was at The View, that was one of the other things that I hated, was that I think in the very beginning, they tried to get like questions through or something, and they just weren't great at doing it. And so they couldn't break that fourth wall. Whereas in radio, the listener is just as much as part of the show as the show itself is, as that those team members are. And so when something happens and you give people that space to just talk about it, right? Or talk about what's going on or say what's happening in your area of town, you don't really have that anywhere else. Like radio is still I feel like the only place that you can do that. Unless you go live and on streaming on YouTube and then you're reading comments and stuff. I just don't feel like anything can replace that same local live connection.
And radio it's nimble. Something happens today, and I could be within minutes, I could be reflecting that on my radio station, where even for television, you've got to gear up and call, the success of TV. And you could speak to this about The View. The View wasn't about, hey, put Barbara Walters or Whoopi Goldberg on, or Meredith Vieira. Go. This is a lot of people have to get together in a room and figure out what to do. Radio, if bad weather hits, I walk into a studio, turn on a microphone, and I get information from the internet, and I'm immediately interacting with those who are listening to it. That's the thing about radio that I love, and why I always think it'll be viable, is it's so nimble. It can move quickly.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that you can do with it. What I want to talk about and touch on is the trust factor, right? So I think that is something that influencers and creators, and I tell this to my clients all the time, people do business with people they know, like, and trust, right? So if you're trying to be on social media, or you're trying to live stream, whatever it is, people need to get to know who you are, because they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Correct.
Right? So what can we tell creators today, in the same vein as radio talent, from what you've taken away from radio talent, what you've learned by helping and coaching radio talent? Is there something that you can bridge the gap with creators nowadays, trying to sort of do the same thing, to create a community, be their own brand manager, and connect? What is the best way to connect?
Well, it's a very deep question. I think that we connect when we do two things in life. And I teach the talent that I work with that the more you do these two things, the more the audience will believe that you are a person and not a persona. And one is to be honest all the time. Our BS meter is all set, to sensitive. We can tell within moments if a brand, a person, is being honest with us, if they're the real deal. To me, the two brands that I talk about are Apple and Whole Foods. Two places I don't perceive I ever would be hired because look at me, I'm not cool enough, right? I'm not in the demo. Brands fill needs. And so when I go into Whole Foods and when I go into the Apple store, I always go in the Apple store. because it gives me a feeling of connection to hipness that I don't perceive I have on my own. So one is you always have to be honest with the audience. And the second thing that I think is powerful is vulnerability. If I share my life with you, it's chances are you're going to identify with the story. I always tell talent that the listener will care about the show when they care about you. And you have the power to do that. There's a talent in Hartford, Connecticut that sent me a break that I work with. Her cancer's back. And she was having a dental exam, and the hygienist found a lump in her mouth. Ended the exam. They went and did x-rays. Long story short, she went to her oncologist who confirmed that her cancer's back, but it was found so early because of the dental exam. And she went back to the dentist's office to tell the hygienist, because of you, things were found early. And she recorded the entire thing. And it wasn't done in a way where it feels like there's an invasion. I mean, she announced, I'm recording this. It was 2.5 minutes of, I've played it for so many shows. Like, this is a great example of both being honest with the audience and being vulnerable, letting them in. And every talent I've played with has walked, I mean, some have cried after 2.5 minutes of radio with someone they don't know. I said, now, do you care about her? They said, oh my God, yes, great. That's what you have to do to build that trust. And the audience will know if you're faking it. Mm-hmm. For me, as a talent, I think and as a coach, what really helped me was I used the T word, therapy. I went to 7-8 years of therapy. Every Wednesday at noon, Dr. Catherine Fulkerson, Durham, North Carolina, and every good thing I got came from that work because I got to know me better. And I'm okay with my strengths. I'm even better okay with my weaknesses. And I can put my flaws out there. And Lori Lewis, mm-hmm. social media maven. I adore her. And I always give credit where it's due. Again, I copy 1 is plagiarism, to copy 6 is research. I'm about to do some research here. Before I met Lori, she made this statement, and I put it in a presentation and credited her, and we became fast friends because of it. Unpolished is the new polished. It's so true. Rach, I'd rather see you Sunday in a hoodie without any makeup on, with your kids sitting at the table eating pancakes, and your kitchen is a wreck, than I would want to see the beautiful meal that some chef created for you at the finest restaurant in the town that you live. Flaws and all. If you can do that, if you can do the vulnerable and be honest, the audience will feel that, and they'll get closer to you, and they'll care about you, and then they'll reply in kind. And that's a relationship under which you have, this sounds manipulative, I don't mean for it to. It's a relationship under which you have influence. So that if I say to my friend, and you and I have known each other a long time, you need to buy this product because I have this product and it works for me, it's highly likely you're going to go buy the product or at least check it out, versus a million ads on Facebook.
That's the space I'm in now. So because of how vulnerable I was on radio, and I mean, you've heard some of my breaks, you know that I was very honest throughout my whole life. I'm trying to continue that space as a creator. It took me 2 years to get back to being here in this space. I had posted something, I was having a happy day. And just as an entrepreneur, how beautiful is it that, if I have no meetings in the morning, I can go out for coffee with my husband before he has to go do something. Do you know what I mean? And I posted that, and it was just such a beautiful feeling. I was so happy with the space I was in. And somebody had commented, you do know we only follow you to watch you fail. For whatever reason, that comment, I spiraled out from it, and I stopped posting because I was like, well, if that's the only reason why you're watching, then I want nothing to do with any of you. And it took me a long time to come back to being present here because I have so much knowledge. I can help so many people in this space, especially I went to VidCon 2 weeks ago, I think it is now. And even all the YouTubers and YouTube themselves and the execs said, don't worry about the Canon cameras or the Blackmagic cameras. Like, this is authenticity. Just showing what really is happening in your everyday lives is all people really want to see.
Right.
And so I've never had an issue with being vulnerable. But what I did realize was like, wow, I can't get that image out of my mind of, they want to see me fail. It's like, so do I. Like, I'm waiting for it too, right? I'm making the mistakes every day. And what I had to learn is same thing in radio. Even the haters are listening, right? Even the haters are paying attention. And I have to not focus on those people. What advice would you give me to move forward? Because it does sort of relate to the hate I got in radio too.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of noise out there. What we tend to do, those of us who are, if I can, ego driven, right? I think we're all ego driven. It's the truth. We all are. Regardless of how confident I might think I appear at times, I'm a 13-year-old inside who I'm still the kid that was beaten up by Herman Hubbard at Gidney Avenue Memorial School. And I have imposter syndrome that I fight all the time in my head. I lay in bed at night after 25 years of doing what I do, waking up in the morning believing that that's the day everyone finds out I've been faking it and I've been making this up as I go along. It's very easy to succumb to the noise. And I don't believe any of it. Maybe that's my cynicism on the positive side, that when someone is very genuinely gives me a compliment, my instincts are just to flip it back on them. I didn't do that. You did that. All I asked was 3 questions, and then you made the decision to do it. And I mean that. I think I'm less powerful than they believe I am. And on the other side of it, if you have haters, it just means that they're noticing you and you have impact and you change people emotionally. But I tell shows, we have our strategy of how we're going to connect with the audience, build trust, build that relationship so that ultimately you have a position of power to become a brand and influence people. And that's, again, not in a manipulative way, because I will do community service projects and I'll leverage what they built and say, look, people do listen and they do want to step up, but we're going to ignore the noise. And you hear it all the time. So you just got to say the strategy is the North Star. Here's the strategy, and I'm working the strategy, and everything else I will ignore.
And I also feel like I have to worry about the people that are there to hear the solutions to the problems, that are there to connect, and not worry about the people that are, keyboard warriors trying to literally get a rise out of me for the purpose of being mean. I didn't think I would be that person that would be like, I'm scared of people. But like, what the hell? It really impacted me for 2 years. I was shocked at my own self.
2 quick things, right? Let's look at Rush Limbaugh, right? Great influencers in any space are polarizing. Love or hate is a lot better than mushy middle. So let's accept the fact that when you step into the arena, as Brené Brown says,
love her,
want to marry her. Brené says when you step into the arena, you're going to take a couple of punches. I know in research and radio research, but I think in life, if you step out and you have fans and detractors, you're doing a good job. It's those who won't commit and stay in the mushy middle as talent that I think you'll never cut through, because you're too worried about what everyone says. And if you know who you are, and if you're okay with who you are, blemishes and all. Rush Limbaugh's a great example. Howard Stern's a great example of people who are polarizing. They're non-mushy middle people and became incredibly popular because of that. And that's what everyone has to do. Radio people, influencers online. As long as it's not illegal, unethical, in bad taste, being done solely for impact, I mean, you really have to be a genuine person. So there are some lines that I won't cross, as I know you won't cross. And I ask my talent, we're never going to do We won't lie to them. We're never going to do anything for impact. We're never going to do anything unethical. We're never going to demean people. We're not going to do low-hanging fruit stuff. We're going to do it in our way.
Well, yeah, because one of the things I realized, and everybody has to understand this in any creation space, you're only as good as your next thing, whatever the next thing is. So I could have planned an event for months and figured all this out while also producing a show. And then the thing happens and all these things happen and you get the pat on the back. And then it's like, okay, now what? Now what? Right? You're always climbing a mountain. I don't think I ever reached the peak of anything. And so I think that's also something I realize with content and creating content is looking forward too, right? Like, so living in this moment and sharing this moment, but I still have to think about what's tomorrow, what's the next day, what's going to happen after that. And I think that's hard because that's where ego starts to come into play for me. And I'm having a really hard time with like putting the ego aside, get clarity on what it is I really want to do. Right. So I love coaching people. I love helping them with their own content. But as soon as I sat down and said, I want to be the person in front of the camera, I know I can do this. Suddenly it's like, okay, am I saying this because I want to help people or am I saying this from an ego space?
Right.
And I'm really still trying to figure that out. Maybe it's a little bit of both and that's okay. That's what I'm having trouble with right now.
David Brooks, who's an op-ed columnist in the New York Times, wrote a spectacular book called The Second Mountain. And the op-ed he wrote in the Times just prior to the book being released was more impactful for me than the actual book itself. You know, I'd rather read a 5-page op-ed than I would a 298-page book.
Just have ChatGPT narrow it down for you now.
Well, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. David Brooks says that in the book, we potentially live on 2 mountains in our life. And the first mountain is the mountain of ego, gratification. I want more followers. I want more money. I want a nicer house, a better car, a longer term contract. I want to be the most popular person in the room. And he says that's all self-serving. And he says there are some lucky people who descend the first mountain and climb the second mountain. And that's the mountain of service to others. And I would be there was a time when I thought it's just me and the company, right? People said, well, why don't you grow the company? And I had mentors that if I didn't have mentors, my ego would have made some very bad decisions. And here I am 25 years later, and it's still me, right? CEO, head custodian, head of HR. I mean, I'm it. I always say when you hire Steve, you get Steve. I don't outsource it. My mentor said, stay a boutique, get really involved in the success of a few people instead of trying to be the biggest and the baddest. And I would be a fool to not say I haven't had moments where I've thought I'll go get the most number of clients in radio. And I'm happy that I didn't in retrospect, because the why you referenced earlier, my why, I have a much greater grasp of that now. And my why is not to make the most money or have the biggest house or the most clients or to work with the most popular talent. My why is to take talent at any level and prove to them the power they have to change people's lives every day by what they do on their radio show and how they interact with them in other platforms. And if I get done with that talent and they say, you changed me because of this, this, and this, you help me learn how to make listeners feel less lonely. That's a career. And that's the second mountain. And so it took me a while to figure that out.
I feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm in that space finally, where it's like I have so much I can help other people with, because a lot of people nowadays don't understand. They think they have to be a YouTuber, right? Or an influencer to tell their stories. And you don't have to be, right? We all have a story to tell.
Yeah.
And our stories are what connects us. You don't have to write a book and publish it. You don't have to do any of those things in a big way, but you can tell your story and help people connect with you. Right. And that's like you gave me the advice to stay boutique. That's what I'm doing. I'm staying boutique so you get me. And conversely, I feel like by sharing the knowledge that I do have whether through YouTube or social media, I can reach more people so that my one-on-ones are a little more sticky. Does that make sense? Where it's not just one-offs, I need monthlies. And so that's sort of where I'm trying to like work out those like icky details. I don't like selling myself. I don't like marketing myself. I hate doing it. I hate it. I've always been word of mouth. I started networking with other women and I've started meeting other entrepreneurs and it's been great so far. But I know that there's going to come a time where, especially right now, a lot of people don't seem to be spending money. And so I feel like I'm going to have to reevaluate how I'm doing this. I can't help everybody for nothing.
Right. But I will say this, though. I received some critical advice when I started the company from people I trust in the business. And I got 3 pieces of advice, none of it connected to the business. Someone said to me, whatever you have, give it away. So what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Well, you'll create value. I have this policy, even after doing this work for as long as I have. I have a policy is that if a talent reaches out to me who I've never met and says, I need your advice. I look at you online. I've heard this about you. Can I send you my audio? Will you listen to our show? 100% of the time, the answer is yes. What do you want for it? Nothing. What I want you to do is to then go be nice to someone else, right? And I'm creating value in that, but really those are my values that were taught to me by my parents. And when that person said that to me, it resonated. And so to this day, like, at the end of presentations, when I go talk to large groups of people, I'll tell you who I stole this from. Again, to copy 6's research. At the end of every presentation that I do, on the very final slide, I say, here's my cell. You got it. Got a question? Reach out to me. Because not everyone has my contact information. And when I do that, like I did that, I do work for NPO, which is the National Public Radio System in Amsterdam. And I did it when I was there last, a couple of Septembers ago. And there was, 1,000 people in the room. And they're like, is that really his number? Is that really? And they tried it. I'm getting dozens of texts. And I'm like, yeah. And to the select few who were comfortable and confident enough that continued to interact with me at no gain for me, they asked questions. I gave them answers. Hopefully I made them better. And all I ask is that you pass it on. There was a guy, the 11th employee at Chick-fil-A. I followed him at a convention a year and a half ago, and he told the story, and he did that on the last slide. And I'm like, I'm taking that. And I texted him. That afternoon. And every time I text him, he remembers me and he writes me back. The other 2 pieces of advice were, don't take on a client if you don't really believe that you can have impact for them. So you've got to believe in them and know when your job's done. Give the money back. Be good with working until you can't teach any longer what you teach to them, and then say, our work is done. I can't help you anymore. Here's your money back. Now go find the person who can move you even further. It's not.
I love that. All 3 of those things I'm dealing with right now, and I've taken that. I've taken your advice. I think the 4th thing I would add is don't be scared to say no.
Yeah.
Like, know when someone's not going to work well with you. Know when you're just going to be talking to a wall because they're not going to execute anything you're telling them to do. And no was hard for me at first. But the more I say no, I feel like the better people have been approaching me now that do really want to do the work, because none of this is easy. There is work involved.
Yeah, that is, and you want that. As a boutique, you can do that. When a company comes to me and says, hey, we're launching this show, or we've got this show in disrepair, can you go in and fix it? And I say, well, I want to go on a couple of dates. I like red wine, and I'm going to work with them for a month just to see what it's like. And they're like, how much money do you want to do that? I'm like, nothing. I don't want anything for it, because if we can't have a couple of dates, we can't decide if we should have a relationship. And at the end of the month, if your people say, God, we like him, and I say, God, I think I can be impactful here, as I've gotten to know your talent. I've watched their work ethic. I've seen their attitudes, because, you can't hide for long. You're a no bull person. I am too. That's one of the foundations of why we really like each other. We know when someone's faking it, right? And you can't hide but for so long until the real Rachel or Steve appear. And at some point in that month, the real person appears. And that's when I go back to the company and I say, I could do business with you. And then they really value you. And by the way, when you do that, there's no negotiating because you've proven value. And they say, we think he helps us. And on the other side of it, there are many times in my 24 years doing this where I go back to the company and say, I don't think it's going to work out. Here's what I saw, and I can't, in good conscience, take your money. And you know what happens when you do that, Rachel? That their respect for you goes up. And they come to you with the next project.
Well, we'll see where all this goes. Do you feel comfortable giving out your website, the Reynolds Group, reynoldsgroupradio.com?
Yeah.
Because I know that you're very specific about radio and a lot of your content is geared towards radio. But honestly, a lot of the stuff that you write about and that you do could be geared towards many different content creators. We are in that space now where everybody has to do all the things, even radio people.
Yeah, you'll find that two things. You'll find that in the blog, which is called Planet Reynolds, which is an icon on the homepage. And then also there's audio that is presented every week where I feel a talent is displaying what the qualities of a genuine, likable, trustworthy talent should. They're being real with the audience and sharing their life. So yeah, reynoldsgroupradio.com is the place. And absolutely. If it helps someone, if someone gets something of value out of it and they get better from it, my pleasure.
I love you. Thank you so much for doing this with me. You're the best.
There's not a thing I wouldn't do for you. You know that I adore you because you are just the real deal for me. And you always have been.
I'm trying to figure out this new space and how to help people. Honestly, I know I can solve so many problems that people have with content creation and all the things, right? Media coaching, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. I believe in myself and I have to just keep moving forward. There's nothing else I can do.
So know two things. Despite my long friendship with you, I'll always stand next to you to help you. And I want nothing from it outside of your continued friendship. That's it. I don't even want George Clooney's phone number. Unless I need George Clooney's phone number.
I know. Let me know. I probably have it.
And the other thing is I'm always rooting for you. We are better when we're all better, and we have a responsibility to work with each other to make everyone better without any interest in what I get from that, outside of the great feeling I have when I go to bed at night, knowing that a person I adore, you, is doing better today than they were yesterday. How about that?
Well, I love you for all that. I love you for all the phone calls, listening to me cry and talking me off the ledge. So you've been an amazing mentor and friend. So I really do appreciate everything that you brought to my life.
Right here for both of us. All right.
All right. Stay right there. Hold on one second.